Now, keep in mind, when I was going through the seminary was those rebellious times of the 60s and 70s. So when students came to demand something, I'm thinking of the students, demanding that they have the right to smoke pot or to have mixed, to have co-ed dorms or something. Those were the demands I'm used to. The students came with two demands. One, that we had a daily holy hour with the Blessed Sacrament exposed, and number two, that priests be available to hear the sacrament for the sacrament of penance every morning. Now that tells you something. Those were the demands that the students made. So that shows you what they hold dear. And they've led us in the recovery, I think, of the sense of the tremendous treasury of piety and devotion, spirituality that we Catholics have, and we're in danger of letting slip away.
Okay. Our Bishop Burley, anything you would like to add?
Excuse me if I say something about the diocese, but it's where I work, We have 12 parishes that they have perpetual adoration, 24 hours every day during all the year. 12 parishes. And I believe it's quite important. Each parish has around 800, 900 persons involved for the role, to take care of the Holy Sacrament day and night. But it's excellent, really. I believe even if they don't become the young persons going to the adoration, if they don't become a priest, but the serenity and the solidity of the lay people becomes certainly very, very appreciable. I am very happy of this great gift that God gave to our dioceses, and we are pushing to other parishes can do if it is possible, because it's delicate, because day and night sometimes is not so easy. But for instance, in the same cathedral, we have 4 days, all the morning adoration to the Holy Sacrament in the morning. In the cathedral, it's only during the morning, 3 hours, since 9 o'clock till 12 o'clock. But we are pushing ahead about the perpetual, or at least adoration of the Holy Sacrament. I believe that is quite important. Also, I believe it's very important if we, as a priests or as a bishops, we say in Spanish, la unción for celebrating the sacraments. It's very important. I don't know how you say unción, the anointing, It is so important that the person see that you have a great respect to the Holy Sacrament, for instance. That is very important. When the priest shows by himself, by his attitudes, how delicate it is to be closest to the Holy Sacrament, I remember always what St. Augustine say, first I believe, after I understand. That is beautiful about the Eucharist, But the first I believe.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Very, very important.
Okay, we are ready for our second question.
Matt McCluskey, Serra Club of Philadelphia. Friday, Archbishop Burley, you gave us sort of the success stories of your minor seminaries in which young men would live in community, however, be educated at the local high schools, and the percentage that went on to the major seminaries and to the pre-ordination, in my mind, were sort of phenomenal. Minor seminaries are quite prevalent in the third world countries, and we have heard 20 years ago that they might be one of the answers to minority vocations in the United States. I would like to ask the U.S. bishops, do they see a need or a possible return for minor seminaries?
Minor. Because, Archbishop Dolan, for us in Mexico, and Archbishop Lucas, minor seminary is exactly what is for you upper high school, you say? Upper high school, no? Then the students live in the seminary, in the minor, who is in a different place of a major, is in a different place. And they go every day to a high school where they found boys and girls, common, regular high school, you know. For instance, we have this high school is Catholic high school with 500 students, only in high school. And there, students from the seminary, they go every day, but instead to going back to their houses, their homes, they go to the minor seminary.
That's a good model, I think. The models are different, aren't they? Because the
different,
educational
yes,
system is
yes.
different. Yes, to respond directly to your question, I think there's a place for high school seminaries. Indeed. There aren't too many left. The ones, and I'm not too well-versed in the ins and outs of the ones that are around, but I think maybe we were too rash in closing high school seminaries. We sure have a pleasant memories of the one. Archbishop Lucas and I were together at St. Louis Preparatory Seminary, and we would, I think, credit that with a great boost to our discernment of a priestly vocation. I do think what I understand, I wasn't here for Bishop Emilio's talk, but those are models we need to look into. I know that in the Archdiocese of New York, we have something called the Cathedral Club, which our vocation director pays special attention to high school young men who have indicated an interest in the priesthood. And they would come together for a weekend a month at the seminary, and they love it. He has absolutely no problems getting them there. So they would have maybe some courses on catechism, they'd have some fun, they'd have prayer together, they'd have mass, they would interact with the seminarians. And the stats are pretty good that a chunk of those guys every year would end up becoming college seminarians. So while it might be a little intimidating now to go back to opening up high school seminaries, let's face it, we have trouble keeping our Catholic high schools going and strong. I like the idea of utilizing the Catholic high schools we got while still providing some type of parallel beginning priestly preparation to those interested. Well worth looking into.
Matt, I'd like to say that I think it's important that we continue to support our college seminaries, because for a while, college seminaries were sort of discarded as taking men too young. But we've seen that college seminaries are increasing importance, and we should have them as well as our theologians. As far as the high school seminaries, I remember I said to my parents when I was in high school, going to start high school, I think I'd like to go to the seminary. My mother said, you're not going to the seminary when you're in high school. You're going to stay home with us. You got a good home. You're in a Catholic high school, and you're going to stay. But I did go in college and enjoyed the college. I think we have to put our resources in at the college level and the graduate level, but I think the idea of working with high school students, we have 18 high schools here in the Archdiocese of Omaha, and our vocation director works with our high schools, and he stays in contact with boys that have an interest. I think that's where you work it at the high school level. And then if a guy at the college level really thinks he's called and would like to try the seminary, we ought to give him an opportunity to go to college seminary. But I think the system that we're working out here now is really the best system, frankly.
Okay, very good. Time-wise, we have about 13 minutes left, so I just want everybody to be aware of that. Sherry, our third question, please.
Your Excellencies, I just wanted to ask you, in your diocese and in your seminaries, how you see the link between devotion to our Blessed Mother, specifically in the Rosary, is being addressed and how you see the link between that and fostering of vocations and families. Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, I think that the devotion to the Blessed Mother is very much alive in our seminaries and very much an integral part of the formation of future priests as it must be. Mary's been given to us as the mother of the church. She's, the mother of priests and seminarians in a very special way, and I think it's not possible, really, to be a healthy and balanced priest or to think about following Jesus faithfully in any vocation without learning from the Blessed Mother and asking her to be an important part of that. I do think that that's very much the case these days, and I think it's something that young people take to when they're introduced to it. So it's something that can be encouraged in families, can be encouraged in our schools. It's an opportunity we have whenever we have young people together to introduce them to the rich tradition we have and the truth, really, of the place of Mary in the lives of all of us, but particularly in the lives of those called to be priests.
Very good, thank you. Question number 4.
I'm Monsignor Bob Murphy from the Diocese of Kansas City, St. Joseph. I'm Vicar General and Vicar for Priests. I have a nephew who is a second theologian at Kenrick Seminary in St. Louis. He lived with me for 2 years before he joined the seminary. So we have a very close relationship, and through him I've come to understand his vision of church and priesthood. And I know as Vicar for Priests, one of my concerns is helping to bridge the gap between the young men who are in the seminary now and with our older priests, their vision of priesthood and church, etc. And I just wonder, both as archbishops and former rectors, if you could perhaps talk about how we can not only bridge the gap, but blend our priests, both young and old, together.
Monsignor Murphy, knowing you as I do and appreciating you as I do, I'm not surprised that you're right on target and you're very perceptive. You know what Monsignor was referring to. I hinted a bit in my talk to you this morning about divisions and cleavages in the church. There is a noted division in the life of the church today about what you might call ideologies between some of the priests that have been ordained a while and the younger priests. Sometimes they even give them names. They'll say, oh, we got the Vatican II priests, we got the John Paul II priests. I myself would tend to think that division is hyperbole, or it's not hyperbole, it's sometimes exaggerated, but it is real, and we know that. Now, and that's what Monsignor was getting at, how to build the bridge, because there is one priesthood, and the unity and cooperation among our priests is essential for the life of the church. So if we see any tensions or divisions, of course, we want to try to bridge them. So Monsignor Murphy's, the problem that he outlined is right on target. A couple things. First of all, we need to avoid caricatures. It's very easy to caricature people. When I was rector of the seminary, I would try to warn our guys about caricaturing the older fellas. Oh, those are those nutty dissenting 60s and 70s priests. We don't want to do that. You don't caricature. And I say to the older priests, you don't caricature the younger priests as these guys that are only interested in wearing maniples and lighting incense at Mass and putting Berettas back on, okay? We do nobody a favor if we caricature. Right, Archbishop? You will, no, that really, if you, you're always going to say, I mean, we look back at when I was growing up, you had, oh, he's a Catholic Action guy, or, oh, he's in the liturgical renewal, or he's the Catholic family movement guy. So divisions, different accents, that's always been there in the life of the church. One of the things I found that helped best, Monsignor Murphy, and I'm not telling you anything because you do this, is when you bring them together. So when you've got one of the guys perhaps ordained in the 60s and 70s that maybe for the summer takes in a guy for the seminary, is there problems? Sometimes, yes. In general, I found they both discover a respect for one another. And they both say, wow, he might have some different approaches than I do, but he loves Jesus, and he loves his church, and he loves the Eucharist, and he loves his priesthood, and as much as I do. And maybe he shows it in a different way, but in essence, we're the same. So just bringing guys together, I have found, is a great way to bridge that gap.
And I agree with you 100%. I was ordained in 1958 to the priesthood, 4 years before the beginning of the Second Vatican Council. I lived through it. And one of the things I've said to younger priests, in order to be sensitive to the older guys, remember what they've lived through. Because they went from a church that was very structured and very solidly put together, and everybody was clear about your role. And they had to let go of things. The change, even for me, I found it very difficult to celebrate, to go from Latin into English. And the first time I faced the congregation saying Mass was very difficult for me. I've lived through that. They had to let go of a lot of things, and there had to be a lot of change. And they're upset if they see that the changes that they went through and the revolution that they went through is somehow being undermined. And then I say to the older guys, they're not undermining this. They believe in the Second Vatican Council. Get together, talk about it, so that you can understand each other. We're all priests together. We love the church, and we got to get on with it. Okay?
Okay, very good.
In the Archdiocese, we are trying to help the young priests ordained from 0 to 5 years of ordination, helped by 3 other priests who work as a team, helping these young priests recently ordained. We make this group of 0 to 5 years old of ordination. And we have another group from 5 to 10 years of ordination, with another team of 3 other priests that they suggested to be accompanied by them, you know? We asked them, who you prefer? Give me 3 names, and I appointed them to be following the processes of his maturity as a priest. And I believe it helps. It helps. It's a way.
Okay, very good. Sherry, you're ready for our next question, please.
Archbishops, I'm Vicki Sempak from Omaha, Nebraska, and I have a question for Archbishop Burley. When we were in Mexico a year and a half ago, we went to a Mass in Durango, and there was a wonderfully passionate priest who talked about the drug culture and how evil it was. And when we left the church, someone made the comment that he might need a bodyguard because he was so brave to speak out as he did. And so I have a question for you and for the other archbishops, and it's with the marginalization, the attempted marginalization of Christianity in our culture and other cultures that we're facing today, is there the courage in our seminarians? Do you see that? And how is that being discussed in your seminaries?
True. Yes, I think what you're talking about is a phrase that Pope John Paul II almost made kitchen table, countercultural. That the church, of course, is countercultural. Was it Chesterton or Belloc? I always get the two mixed up, who said the role of the church is to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. I forget. So there's always that prophetic edge to the church's teaching. There's always tough things that we have to say. And as our questioner mentioned, in today's culture and society, particularly in the United States, when there would be very rising powers who want to relegate the church and the gospel to the sidelines, and to kind of have a least common denominator, feel-good type of religion that doesn't challenge us, it is very important for seminary rectors to form men to be courageous in being willing to say tough things, and to be ready for criticism, and to be ready for opposition. I also think, though, that one of the, and this is so true in many areas of our society, and what's interesting is how different people will get upset. It depends on whose ox is being gored, right? So if you preach, say, on the Holy Father's new encyclical, mentioning sometimes the obligation that wealthy nations have to the poor of the world, and that cutthroat capitalism always needs to be tempered, kind of more what you might call a social justice agenda. You might find the more conservative members of your parish will say to you, you know, Father, you should keep politics out of this. If you speak of an ardent pro-life message, you'll find the more left-wing members of your parish would say, Father, that has no place in the pulpit. So sometimes you can kind of take comfort when, over the course of a year, both sides seem equally aggrieved. Now, but one of the things we as rectors also try to do is to teach the how of it. That we're able to say tough things. We're able to tell the truth lovingly. Truth and Charity, Charity and Truth, the title of the Holy Father's new encyclical. So sometimes priests, if we're going to be criticized, it should be for what we say and for not how we say it. So to be able, like Jesus, like John Paul II, like Benedict XVI, to be able to say tough things in a warm, gracious, loving way is a talent that not everybody has and that we have to work upon. That's why I sometimes think we seminary rectors agree with Aristotle that one of the premier virtues is prudence. Prudence, all right? That we have to, and prudence always is the virtue of how to do things. So that we have to be countercultural, you bet we do. But we do that in a prudent way, lest we alienate people.
Yes, but I hope you understand me that the problem sometimes in Latin America is that the discernment is more ideologically than evangelically. This is our problem. Then we need to insist very much with the students that I said in my talk, for the believer, this implies an evangelical discernment, which is an interpretation born in the light and power of the living and personal gospel, Jesus Christ, with the gift of the Holy Spirit, founded on the confidence and love of Christ, who always and untiringly cares for the church. Because between us, the problem sometimes is that some priests, this discernment are from the point of view of ideology. And we need to be very clear with them. No, it's from ideology, it's from the gospel, evangelical discernment. And that is very, very important for, at least in Latin America.
I want to make a comment about John Vianney. St. John Vianney, 1850, died. But remember the situation in which he found himself after the French Revolution? The church was being battered. The clergy were criticized. Many of them were killed. John Vianney went into Ars when it was a very unpopular time to be a priest in a culture that was totally anti-Catholic. And what did he do? He spent hours in the church praying. And gradually, people began to realize that this man had something. There was something in him that they were amazed at. And he transformed that community. He transformed the culture because of his holiness. That's how we address a culture that's inimical to Catholic faith. We transform it by our own faith and our own witness and by our prayer life, and it makes a difference. It's making a difference in Omaha. It's going to make a difference in all your dioceses if you work.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time. We have time for one more question.
Thank you. Stan Dennis, Topeka. 10 years after graduating medicine, I ran into a classmate in Sydney, and I was amazed to see that Dr. Tony was now Father Tony. And he made a comment I've never forgotten. He said, I thought going to the seminary and studying one subject would be straightforward after the complexity of medical training. He said, I had no idea the depth the training I was going to receive. Bishop Lucas, would you like to comment very briefly on the current curriculum in the seminary? Thank you.
It is very rich, and so it's hard to comment on it briefly, but except to say that in my own experience working with seminary faculty and now knowing seminaries, a number of different dioceses here in this country, that the curriculum of studies is very solid.